Blockhead friends. Sarah Hechtman here again to share with you this week's Blockhead block. This week our block is What a Lark, presented by Janet Clare. Be sure to go and download your pattern and get it all printed out and get ready to sew. Okay, so this week our block has two different techniques within this block. The first technique we're going to learn is foundation paper piecing. Oh, a lot of people get scared of that little technique, but don't be scared. This paper piecing block is a super simple block to do, a great block for beginners. The first block we're going to be doing is the foundation paper piece Peaky and Spike, and our second block is our old friend half square triangle. So the first thing you have to do in foundation paper piecing is you have to print out your pattern on paper. One of the things that you have to be super careful about is making sure that you are printing your block the size that it needs to be printed. Some printers will default to a different printer setting, but you want to make sure that your printer setting is set to 100% so that you are going to be getting the 3.5 inch finished, or the 3.5 unfinished size block that will work within this block here. Most of the time on your paper there will be a 1 inch ruler that you can check to make sure that your block is printed right. Ran out of a little bit of space here because we were wanting to save paper, but be sure when you print this out that your seam allowance here measures a 1/4 inch. Once you get that set with your printer, you're going to take and cut your pieces apart and we're going to get started with the basics of foundation paper piecing. When you also, I want to point out, when you print this out, they make special papers that you can print this out on, or you can use regular copy machine paper. That's what I use. It's what I have at my house. It has never done me wrong. So don't be intimidated by having to buy a special product when you do foundation paper piecing. Okay, so you're going to then gather there's going to be 3 pieces that you're going to be having. You're going to have your paper, you're going to have your square, center square fabric, your piece number 1, and you're going to have 2 of these, pieces 2 and 3, that we're going to be using to complete the block. So the first step that you want to do is you want to make sure, and I'm going to turn on my little light board because it makes it a little bit easier to make sure that you've got your fabric lined up to cover your square on your foundation paper piecing. Now I also want to point out on the foundation paper pieces that it has numbers on your foundation paper. So you're going to see within this big triangle, you're going to see number 1, you're also going to see a number 2 and a number 3. It's kind of like paint by number, it's sewing by number when you do foundation paper piecing. So we're going to start with number 1. Our number 1 piece is our big blue, in my case, it's the big blue square. So I'm going to lay this down and I'm going to make sure that my blue piece covers where it's supposed to be within my block. As you can see, hopefully, it is much bigger than what you need here. And it is going to cover that. Now, if you're using some other smaller pieces, you want to make sure that you've got at least your 1/4 inch seam allowance around the outside edge of where your fabric is to be placed on there. So you're going to put that piece there. Now, we need to secure that piece down on that paper somehow. Some people like to use a quick little glue stick. You take your glue stick and you pop it down. I don't want to use a glue stick. I am going to use a little pin, a straight pin, and I pin it to my paper so that it won't slip and slide as you're doing your next few steps to get piece number 2 attached. You'll also notice that I have placed this fabric right side up on the wrong side of the paper. Okay, right side up on the wrong side of the paper. So now, how do I get this piece attached? What do I do? How am I going to figure out where I'm going to sew on here? So the next thing you want to do is you want to trim so you know where to line piece number 2 up on your block. So I'm going to take and I'm going to, if you flip it over, oops, I pinned that on the wrong side, so I'm going to pin it over so that it's not in the way of my, where I'm going to be doing some trimming. Okay, so I move my pen over so that it clears the way for where I'm going to trim. So the solid lines on here are our sewing lines, okay? But I'm going to trim that so I can make sure I get an accurate seam allowance within. So I am going to be using, I've got a couple of things I'm going to share with you that I like to use when I foundation paper piece. And I'm going to show you some of my tried and true trusted pieces because I love to foundation paper piece, and these things have been well loved throughout all of my sewing. So I'm going to show you my way. This little friend is a bookmark that I have had for many, many, many years. It is a cardboard piece of paper. It's a bookmark actually from Martingale when they had books. So you can use a piece of cardboard, you can use a piece of template plastic, just some kind of stiffer product that will let you fold back that paper against it to give you a sharp edge. I'll move it over here so you can kind of see. You're going to lay that right along that edge, and you're going to fold that paper back along that edge. And you're going to leave that piece of cardboard in there. Then I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to lay down my add a quarter ruler. I also, and actually I'm going to use the add an eighth. They make an add a quarter ruler where it gives you a 1/4 inch seam on there, or there's an add an eighth. I've just gotten used to using the add an eighth because a lot of times I do a little tiny piecing, and the tinier the piecing, the smaller the seam allowance bulk that you want in that product. So I'm going to take my add an eighth and I'm going to butt it up right against that hard surface where that was. You'll notice that it has that little ledge on there. I don't know if you can see that within there, but there is a raised ledge that lets you push it up against that cardboard piece. So you just line that up against that cardboard piece, and you're going to just trim it away with your rotary cutter. You're going to fold your paper back, and voila, you have now a straight edge that you can line piece number 2 up with to get your foundation paper, to get the accurate seam allowance there. So let's grab our piece number 2, which is this rectangle. Okay. Now people are like, this is so crazy to me. I don't know which way I place my fabrics. From this point on, you're putting right side of fabric against right side of the fabric, just like you do with regular piecing, okay? The only difference is we're not going to sew from this top side, we're going to sew from the paper side. But let me show you some hints and tricks on how to make sure that you get this lined up so that when you flip this over, it lines up perfectly and you don't have to unsew and reposition your fabric. So, because I have trimmed this, the way that this piece is cut is it will automatically fit perfectly within that, that space. Now, if you would not have trimmed that and you would have placed that like this, you would have sewn this and flipped it and it would not have covered your space, okay? So you want to make sure that you line everything up the correct way. I don't sew until I make sure that that piece is going to fit and cover that space. So I do a quick temporary placement. I then kind of flip it over and I have it here on my light box. I can see through that, I can see where the lines that I need to cover. I see that it's going to fit. So I am ready to sew. I know that that position is good. So I am going to, now I'm going to pin this in place. Grab a pin. Now you don't have to pin. If you feel comfortable, personally, I am not a pinner. But if you feel more comfortable, please, please, please use pins to secure that fabric in place. And you're just going to do one little pin just to hold it so it doesn't slip and slide as you're going to sew. Okay, so now we're going to go to the machine and we're going to sew. You're going to actually sew from the paper side. So you're going to flip over and you're going to stitch down on that line between 1 and number 2. When you go to your machine, be sure with foundation paper piecing, you want to shorten your stitch length on your machine. Every machine is different with your settings. If you normally sew with a set on 2, lower your stitch count or your stitch setting down to 1.5 or 1.7 or 1.8 because you're going to be ripping this paper off and you want that needle to serrate that paper as many times as possible. You don't need to go to a micro stitch, but a 1.5 to a 1.8 is a great stitch length to use as you're doing that. I also want to point out that when you go to stitch, you want to start stitching about a 1/4 inch before the line and finish about a 1/4 inch after the line. Don't worry, it's going to be fine. We just want to make sure that those stitches stay secure at those points where the fabric are going to meet. I'll meet you back here once you get that step done. Okay, so now we're back. I have sewn along that line, and you can see right here that I have stitched a little bit before where I started and finished a little bit at the end. You're also going to now want to press that fabric out of towards the fabric that you just sewed on. So you can do a quick finger press. You can also do a roller, or you can take it to your iron and do it. On smaller pieces, I usually just sit at my machine and I finger press it because I don't want to have to get up. I get in a flow of sewing and I don't want to change that and do that and interrupt the flow. So I finger press that back, and now my block looks like this. Okay, so we've got one more piece to attach. So now we need to trim away so we can get our seam allowance line for our last piece, our step number 3. I'm going to show you this other ruler, the second ruler that I have. It actually has a beveled edge to it, and so you don't have to have your extra little piece of cardboard. I'm so attached to it, I have to use my cardboard. But I can be flexible. I can share how to do other ways to do it, because I'm showing you this way doesn't mean it's the exact perfect way to do it. If you have your favorite way of foundation paper piecing, go for it. There's just way too many things out there in the world that you can do. So this one has the beveled edge to it. So you're going to take that beveled edge and put it right along that line like we did before. You're going to this one is made then that you take and you pull this out, and then you put your edge along there and you trim that away. Throw that piece over there. So now we have a piece that looks like this. Okay, I'm a very bad person. I don't like to close my rotary cutter. Don't come at me, people. Okay, so now we have a piece that looks like this. Okay, so now we're ready to place our piece number 3, which is an exact rectangle just like we used in piece number 2. Again, we're going to line it up. You can use your light board. A lot of times I do this light board method because I don't want to have to get out my light board and see where it's at. So I line it up and make sure that it's going to be there. And once you do a few of these, you'll get to where you don't have to double and triple check it before you do each step. But again, fold it over, make sure that it's going to cover your piece, and you're going to stitch that down just like we did before on the paper side, a little bit before the line and a little bit after the line to secure your stitches there. So now, with the magic of TV, here is the completed block. Okay, so you can see I've got all this extra fabric hanging out alongside of this, so we need to trim this down to the perfect size. So this is a 3.5 inch finished or unfinished block. So I am lucky enough to have a 3.5 inch finished square ruler. So that makes this super easy to trim up. But if you don't have a 3.5 inch square ruler, don't worry. You can use any size ruler that you want to use and just trim that up alongside that outside edge. So again, you can line your 3.5 inch square ruler up here, and you can start trimming. So you're going to trim and you're going to trim. You're going to trim 2 sides. Again, if you have a rotating mat, this would be a great time to pull out your rotating mat. I don't have one here with me today, so I'm just going to quickly flip that around by using that fabric. But I'm actually going to use the other ruler to show you how I would trim if I didn't have this 3.5 inch. I would go ahead and do that with this if I had the 3.5 inch. If I don't have a 3.5 inch ruler, I'm going to line up my 1/4 inch seam allowance line there with my 1/4 inch line on the ruler, and that outside edge should be just right along there. And you're just going to trim. I'm going to flip it, line it up again, and trim it and you have your perfect 3.5-inch square Peaky and Spike block. Okay, so go ahead and complete trim and sew on your piece number 3, trim up all of your blocks, and meet me back here. You're going to complete 4 of these. Meet me back here, and we're going to move on to the next unit within our block. Okay, we're back, and we're going to make our step number 2 unit, which is our dear friend half square triangle. Now, we've previously shown that. There's going to be a link below in the description that will take you to a full-on tutorial, but I'm going to give you a brief reminder on how to do the half square triangles. Remember, you're going to start out with 2 different squares. You'll put those 2 right sides together. You can choose to draw a diagonal line, or if you use diagonal seam tape, you can do that. We are going to be making the 2 half square triangle units at a time method in this block. So once you get that all lined up, then you're going to sew on either side of that diagonal line with a scant 1/4 inch seam, and then you're going to cut that line, press them, and get them all trimmed up. This unit uses, let me double check, it is a 2-inch unfinished half square triangle. So let's go and make, you're going to be making 16 of these. So let's go make 16 of those and meet me back here, and I'll show you how we're going to attach all of these 16 half square triangles. So we're back after sewing our 16 half square triangles, and I've got different units here on showing you how we're actually going to be making 4 of these units, but I want to show you how I do that and laid it all out. So you're going to start with 4 different units, and we're going to lay them out we're making a 4-patch unit with this, okay? So you're going to lay them out following the direction of the diagonals as printed on the pattern, okay? So you're going to take and you're going to lay all 4 of them out, okay? You're then going to be sewing oh, look, those aren't the same. I don't have them laid out like the pattern is, so they get laid out like this. So we're going to lay them like that. So then you're going to sew your top row together and your bottom row together. Now I'm going to show you, then once you sew those rows together, I did an alternate press on that so that when you go to sew them together to make the 4-patch, your seams nest, okay? So once you get your 2 half square triangles sewn together in your 2 rows, right sides together, nest, and you're going to use a 1/4 inch seam and sew those together. Then we're going to take it and we're going to press these, and I'm going to show you a little magic trick on how to spin your seam on the back of this unit, okay? So go get your 4 units sewn together like this. We're going to put them together like this. They're going to end up like this, and meet me back here, and I'm going to show you how to press it and how to spin that center seam. We're back, and we have got 4 of these units that are sewn like this. So let me show you a fun little trick on how to press and spin your seams. Now let's first talk about, typically a lot of people will just press it to one side, and that seam gets really bulky, especially when you've got 4 of these units right here in the center, and it makes a little bump. It's not a bad thing, but if you can avoid that, let's avoid that, okay? So you're going to go to your ironing mat. We brought in an ironing mat here. So we are going to then, you notice that the other 2 seams are going in the opposite directions. This is going to spin counterclockwise because of the way that these seams are pressed. So we are then you're going to take and you're just going to kind of pop, and those seams that go down to, or the stitches that go down to where the center seam is, kind of pop open, okay? And if you look, you're going to get kind of like a little pinwheel effect right there. Let me move that iron just out of the way just briefly while I'm trying to show this. But as you notice, then this seam goes this way, these seams spin around here, and you get this fun little added little thing that nobody's ever going to see except you as you press it, but it's super fun to do. You then take your iron. I usually press it from the back to give it a nice press, and I also press it from the front, and then it gives it a nice flat surface area for you to do. I have one other one that I can show you just to give you another visual on how that will work. Okay, so again, you start out with your block like this. You're going to open it up. This one is actually spinning clockwise. So it doesn't matter whether it spins clockwise or counterclockwise. Each block is going to tell you which way it's going to spin. So you just pop those little seams, finger press it with your iron, and voila, you have a block that is a nice and flat block. Do that to your 4 units and meet me back here as we make the final unit that's going to be used in the block, our center unit. Okay friends, we're back now to make the center part of our block, which is a simple cross unit. This unit uses 7 different pieces, and you're going to be having 2 outside little squares and a center square that will form that cross. You've got your center bar and the other side, which is just like that too. So you're going to start out simple block construction. You're going to take and sew your 2 side units. So you're going to sew these as 3. So you'll take and you're going to stitch that together. You're going to press that, and you're going to sew the other unit on there, and you're going to end up with a unit that looks like this, it's a little 3 block unit. You're going to have 2 sides of that unit, and magic of TV, we're going to save some sewing time here. You're going to pretend that is there. Then you're going to take your 2 side units, and we're actually making like a rail fence block again, so that you're going to sew 1 strip to here. You'll sew this strip down, 1/4 inch seam, press. You can press that seam open or you can press it to one side, whatever your preference is. Open that up, and then you will you'll sew that other unit on, and then you're going to end up with a cross unit to be used as your center unit within the block. Okay, so let's get all of our pieces and parts gathered together, and we're going to get the block all sewn together. All right, we are now back with all of our units. We are going to be making a 9-patch block as we put our units together. So, but let's first talk about, we made our very first step was the foundation paper piecing, and I still have the papers on there, okay? A lot of times, depending on what your project is, you want to leave your papers on until the very end, until this block is all encapsulated within another block. This block, there's not that many blocks within this quilt that are foundation paper piece. I feel very comfortable going ahead and tearing my paper off at this point during the process. So let me show you, and this one is actually very easy because it's only 3 pieces that you have to tear off. Because you've used the smaller stitch link, it perforates that paper just a little bit more. So you're just going to reach up and tear that paper off, tear off number 3, and then you take off number 1. Super simple, quick and easy, like that. Now, a lot of people they say, oh, well, this is an extra added step, but look at the perfection on this block. Now, to make this block another method, you can make it using a Tri-Rex ruler, and you have to cut out all these templates, special templates and all this stuff. That takes just as much time as I'm standing here and tearing this paper off. It's taking me like 30 seconds to do these 4 units. So this is a good time to do that. So now that we've got that all out, we're going to lay our block out, and I like to lay it out on a surface so that you can make sure that, again, all of your pieces and parts are going the correct direction. So we're now going to sew it together as a 9-patch unit. So I'm going to sew the top row together, I'm going to sew the middle row together, and I'm going to sew the bottom row together. Once I do that, then I'm going to press my seams in alternating directions so that when I go to put the rows together, that they'll nest and it'll be a nicer finish on that block. Go do that, sew your rows together, and we'll meet you back here with the finished block. All right, and ta-da, we have a finished block. And wait, your eyes are not deceiving you. This is a different color than I was showing during the demo. This is an alternate color that I am actually making 2 of these quilts as we're going along. I am using one where I'm using all scrappy pinks and a gray and a white, so you'll be seeing those in my other tutorials. with that option. That wraps us up for this week. I want to thank Janet Clare for offering up such a wonderful, fun block to make, teaching us a new skill with foundation paper piecing. We look forward to seeing you back here next week. Have a great week and happy sewing.